Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Welcome. I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marina McCarthy. I am a faculty here at the Miami Herbert Business School. I'm also a director of Johnson and Dawson One Leadership Institute that organizes this event. You know, every year, Leadership Institute looks for an accomplished and dynamic speaker, somebody with an interesting background, somebody who is well respected and admired in business community. And I have to say, looking by the size of the audience, looks like we did a good job this year. So without further ado, let me invite somebody that you know very well, Vice Dean Hari Nataraja, who will introduce our very special guest for tonight. And Hari will also be moderating the discussion.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Come on, guys. You can do better than that. Good evening. Thank you. That's a lot more like it. Welcome to this wonderful event. Welcome to the annual Irasamuan Leadership Lecture. Welcome also to Miami Herbert Business School for those of you who are not part of our school here. It's a great pleasure to see all of you. This is a wonderful evening. We specially ordered this incredible weather for you, so I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm very pleased to see so many of our students here. Can all of our students raise their hands, please? I just want to get it. Okay. Can we have a round of applause for our students, please? I'm particularly thrilled because we are in the business of developing the leaders of tomorrow. And an important part of that is making sure that they hear from the leaders of today, learn from their experience, listen to them, and understand the choices that they've made that have led them to their own path of leadership. So it's a particular pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is none other than Brandon Shore. Brandon Shore, as many of you know, is SVP of Football Operations and Business Administration at the Miami Dolphins. So basically all that means is that he does everything at the Miami Dolphins. So whether it's negotiating a player contract, whether it's managing the salary cap, whether it's looking at field operations, the sod, the turf, the grass, the sales, all of that stuff falls under Brandon's purview. Brandon's had an incredible 13-year career at the Miami Dolphins where he's done literally every single aspect of business at least once. So he started his football administration staff, done HR, done finance, done, I'm missing other areas, legal affairs. All of this has been done, in part because he also has an incredibly wonderful background. See, we even have ducklings attending our talks here. So part of because of his incredibly rich background, he started off as an undergraduate at Elon University, specializing in accounting and business administration, went on to get his JD from the University of Miami School of Law, go Canes, wise choice there. And then, so you can see that he's both a CPA and a JD. That puts him in some very elite place in terms of being able to bring his rich background into play in this particular field. So it's a great pleasure to invite Brandon to stage. Brandon, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start off with this incredible role that you have. This role that you have seems to be all-encompassing. So what does Brandon do day to day? What does your role look like?
Sure. So one of my favorite parts of my role is that it's different every single day. And it encompasses a lot of things, covers a lot of different areas, and is a unique challenge every day. No 2 days are really the same. That at times stresses me out a great deal. But I love what I do. I love the people that I get to work with and for, and I love the unique challenge that all the different departments and all the different areas of the business that come across my desk every day allow me to help contribute in a way to ultimately, win the Super Bowl is our number one goal across all areas of the business. But it's win the Super Bowl, it's grow revenue and impact the Miami community.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I see how you're excited about all these different aspects of your role. Are there particular favorites? Are you allowed to name favorites?
I can't name favorite players, but there's really two parts. There's the quote unquote sexy part of the job, which is negotiating the player contracts, finalizing trades for marquee players. That's the stuff that everybody reads about in the paper and on Twitter every day. That's sort of the obvious one, but the one that is really near and dear to me and is singularly the most, the part of the job I enjoy the most is I have the unique privilege of overseeing our HR department and football and business. So I get to have an impact on who we bring into the organization, and ultimately their development, their growth, and their rise is really, my favorite part of what I do is the hiring process and the development of really future leaders in the organization. It's something that is really, really special to me, is to be a part of hiring a young, high potential, over ambitious, anxious student from the University of Miami, and through my own experiences, give them some guardrails and guidance and support and mentorship to watch them accomplish their dreams. Like that, to me, that's more rewarding than the Jalen Ramsey trade from last week, which was pretty rewarding. But that is more of a long-lasting impact on and can be scaled across all the people that we bring in every year.
That's wonderful to hear. So, we have this kind of favorite part in terms of seeing people develop. That's clearly rewarding, very gratifying. What are aspects of your role that maybe you're not so excited about? You go into this meeting thinking, well, do I really need to be here?
Yeah, so as it relates to football and players in particular, we start the off season with 90 players on the roster, and ultimately at the end of training camp, about 30 to 40 of those guys lose their jobs. So the communication associated with that, after developing relationships and in some ways, crushing a dream for a player who wants to be, a pro athlete, that's difficult. So being involved in that decision-making process is often hard. But as we've all experienced in our own ways throughout our lives, a short-term setback, a short-term adversity really is just the window to the next opportunity. And, you try to position it that way, and you give meaningful feedback, ways to improve, get better, et cetera. And it's something that, many guys, many players, many Pro Bowlers have been cut before in their career, and it doesn't mean, that their career is over. And, specific to our business operations, there are firings associated with that too. It's a little different. But I would say, the unique challenge of dealing with, all sorts of different people, personalities, motivations, goals, aspirations, dreams, balancing, often conflicting interests among departments, because if you make a decision that benefits one, it often impacts another. So just balancing the human component of all that is often difficult, but at the same time is a fun part of the job as well.
Wonderful. Are we okay? So, through the day, you're making lots of important decisions. Scope, impact, footprint of your decisions are pretty vast. What is your thought process? How do you arrive at these decisions? Do you have a kind of go-through plan as you think through these decisions?
Sure. So it'll be, specific to the decision at hand in a given day, given moment, given hour, given minute, whatever it might be. For me, I'm a big proponent of preparation. In negotiations, I won't engage in negotiation with an agent unless I'm confident that I have more information, more detail, more preparation in a way that, I feel a level of confidence that I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be outsmarted. I could still screw it up, and I have plenty of times. But I think I want to approach decisions knowing I've done all the necessary work to put me in the position to make the best decision, and for the right reasons. I'll get plenty of decisions wrong, but I won't be upset as much of a bad outcome as I would be as a bad process. So if I'm not prepared, if I'm rushed, if I'm, if I make an emotional decision, that's when I'll really get upset with what happened. But if the process is good and sound and thorough and researched, I can live with the outcome. And more times than not, if you do that first part well, the outcome will be close to what you want as possible.
As an operations professor, it's particularly rewarding to hear you say process a lot of times. Process is everything, guys. Please remember that.
We have an operating philosophy at the organization, and Tom Garfinkel, who's our vice chairman, president, CEO, he brought it with him when he was hired in 2013, and it's the first slide that he shows at every all-staff meeting in the organization. And Tom is a incredible leader, great mentor and friend. He starts every meeting with this slide, and his philosophy is how to win on and off the field. It's people, process, results. So if you get the people right, which is the hiring, training, development, identifying talent, which is why we have such a heavy investment in our HR process. If you get the people right and you develop the right processes, the results are inevitable. So it doesn't mean they come every single time. It doesn't mean they come early, but they will come often if you get those first two components in the right place.
Absolutely. So, in this decision process, there's a lot of homework involved. There's a lot of preparation involved. Is there a particular decision that you made where you were able to connect and say, I succeeded or we succeeded because I did the prep on this? I was not surprised. I knew this was coming. Low probability, but I saw it coming.
Sure. I won't say that I was smart enough to see this coming, but a large component of my role in football operations and in the salary cap is planning and optionality. So it's the ability to have flexibility when unexpected things appear. So I can't often predict which named player is going to be available, which player is going to demand a trade, who's going to be upset with their contract at another team, whatever it might be. But it's my job to always maintain a level of flexibility with our roster construction and our salary cap that we can capitalize when these unexpected opportunities come. Last year that unexpected opportunity was named Tyreek Hill, and he wasn't available until he was, and then there was a 3-day, all-night, negotiation first with the Chiefs, and then with Tyreek's agent in order to ultimately, close that trade and close the largest wide receiver contract in NFL history in a period of 3 or 4 days. Where if I started working on that idea when I first heard that Tyreek was available, it already would have been too late. So there was months and years of preparation to maintain flexibility, know the corresponding moves we would have to make to fit him under the salary cap and all the rules associated with the transaction and the trade itself and all that. So it goes back to preparation where you don't get ready, you stay ready in a lot of ways, and that involves this continuous mindset of I'm going to be prepared all the time because I don't know when that opportunity is going to present itself. And if I start then, it's too late. And in our business, it's a competitive environment. So it's not like working at a bank where everybody can get rich or everybody can make a lot of money. In football, there's winners and losers. So if you're not ready, somebody else will be, and they'll capitalize on an opportunity that if you did your diligence, it might have been your chance.
All right. So what about a decision that didn't quite pan out the way you thought it would?
Sure. So I've been a part of hiring hundreds of people in the organization over my time. A number of those haven't worked out. A couple of high-profile ones haven't worked out, and that's okay as long as you learn from it and you don't make the similar, mistakes, if there were mistakes associated, with that bad decision. But, it's really about not living in that bad decision as much as what can you learn from it. And, our head coach, Mike McDaniel, uses this all the time with the players and with his coaching staff. And, he says often, like, adversity is opportunity, adversity is opportunity, adversity is opportunity. So a failure is only a failure if you let it be that. But if you think through it and think through the other side of it, it's an opportunity to improve, to get better, to hire somebody better, to learn to improve your processes because it had a blind spot, or, learn how to ask better questions, or learn how to do more, whatever it is. I think, a failure, is really just an opportunity to improve, because, that's sort of the name of the game in business, this infinite game of it just never stops. So.
I love the growth mindset and the idea that we're constantly evolving into better versions of ourselves. So if I may shift gears a little bit here, one of the interesting things that I saw about your background is somewhat of an itinerant thing here, where you start with accounting, then go to JD, then do HR, come back to legal affairs, finance. How did this all happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. No, but I was born and raised in South Florida. I was a season ticket holder. My parents were season ticket holders for all the major sports teams down here. And when I was old enough to know what a job was, and to start thinking about what I wanted to do for a career, I would tell my dad that I wanted to be the guy on the sideline with a suit. I didn't know what he did, but I wanted to do that. So as time went on, I would study, all the folks that were in the jobs that I wanted, and I would sort of reverse engineer their backgrounds, and that helped me set a course to, ultimately get to, where I am today. And so I would look at all the GMs in the NFL and the NBA and all the team presidents and all the major sports, and I would list them out, and I would put them in buckets of, related to the owner. Okay, well, my dad owned a plumbing company and was very successful in South Florida. He was never going to own a sports team, so I couldn't do that. Okay, so another bucket of executives at the top were, Hall of Fame athletes, or they played, they played in the NFL or the NBA, and I had a very successful high school football career, but I knew that wasn't going to be the path. And the next group was, folks who lived decades in the scouting jobs, and that wasn't something that was stimulating. I thought would be stimulating to me, being on the road, watching players going to obscure parts of the country, being away from home 200 nights a year. That wasn't something that I thought was attractive, and not going to be an environment where that would be really challenging and stimulating for me. And this last bucket was this really small subset of executives in football operations, basketball operations, baseball, that had administrative backgrounds. They were lawyers, they were finance folks, and I thought, okay, well, that's something I could do. And when I went to Elon, that was my path. I was going to become an expert in a particular area, so that while I didn't want to believe there was anything other than working in sports, I wanted to have somewhat of a plan B, that if it didn't work, I had some transferable skills. So that was accounting for me. And then I went to law school here, and but the goal was always to get into a sports environment, specifically football. So I was very lucky to get an internship with the Dolphins during my 2L year, and that story could be an hour in and of itself. But the quick version is I was at a season ticket holder event with my dad for Dolphins club season ticket holders, and I met the general manager of the Dolphins at the time, and I shook his hand, and the only thing I could think of to ask him was, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to work in the NFL? And we started talking, and the next day he emailed me and said, nice to meet you, would love to have you interview for an internship. And that was May of 2010, and I've never left the Dolphins since. So it was the right place, the right time, the preparation to not screw it up, and through my years at the Dolphins, I worked 3 years as an intern in football ops. I filled the water coolers. I picked people up from the airport. I did magnets and I whatever I could. And at the end of that 3 years, I think I was 26 or 27. I had my law degree. I passed the bar. I passed the CPA. But I was making minimum wage, and I lived with my parents. And to me, it was, this. I was living the dream. It was the happiest I had ever been, in my life, because I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't paid very much money, and I didn't have much responsibility. But I knew it was putting in the time on the front end to what hopefully pay off, in the long run. So I did that for 3 years, and then I ended up moving to our business operations as our first in-house counsel that the Dolphins ever had. So they had outsourced all of their legal work for many years. So I was 27. I was a year out of law school, 2 years out of law school. I never worked for a law firm because I worked for the Dolphins during law school, so I didn't know how to be a real lawyer. And I was the most senior-ranking lawyer in the organization at 27. And if you want to learn something fast, be terrified of failing, and failing for a very public organization. So I was, obsessive about trying to not screw up and learn and get better and try to improve the organization. And so, I did that. I pivoted a little bit into finance because there was a gap in the organization about, folks who worked in finance who understood football, salary cap, the payment of players. But since I had done that for 3 years, I was the natural fit to then pivot into to do that. And then right about that time, our new CEO was hired, Tom, who I mentioned, and he asked me if I would consider moving into HR. And if he was here, he would tell the story that I started crying, that I was so sad, and he makes fun of me about that all the time. But he knew my goal was to ultimately run an organization and potentially be a general manager or a team president or whatever that is. And in all my studies of what those people do and their backgrounds, none of them ever worked in HR. So I was so, sort of, I know this isn't the linear path that I set out in my life. And so he, in all of his wisdom, told me that it was an important role to really turn around the organization. We were the only team in the NFL that wasn't profitable at the time in 2013. And we had bad processes. We didn't have enough good people, and he, for whatever reason, entrusted me with working in the HR department to really flip that page and turn it around. So it was not something I ever dreamed of doing, and apparently I cried when I was asked to do it. But I went into it. I went all in, and he promised me that it would change the way I think about organizations and people and structure and hiring and leadership, and I trusted him, and he told me that if you do this and you do it well, it's going to set you apart in a really unique way from all the other people that you think you want to be. And so I ended up doing that and got way too much responsibility, way too young, and we had a lot of success doing it, and then had an opportunity to jump back into football operations in 2016 to be, the sort of the number 2 guy in the salary cap and pick up some operational responsibilities, and ultimately that evolved into picking back up the business responsibilities that I had given up and getting them more, in an increased scale and responsibility. And it's not something that you really dream up, this sort of nonlinear hodgepodge path, but I wouldn't change any of it. And what I thought was at the time a demotion in the HR role was the greatest thing professionally that's ever happened to me, because it made me really understand organizational structure and hiring and how to build a culture and one that's really high performing, and not just, you show up and you're happy that you work for the Dolphins. That's not good enough. It's about being great, and it's about identifying these traits that thrive in the environment that we built. So it was really, really cool to do that. with Tom and with another executive, Dan Casperson, who worked in Fortune 500 companies for decades at a very high HR level. And that's, again, I didn't plan this at all. The job I have now, I hoped that I would get to, but I would have thought the path was fiction on how I ended up getting there, but I wouldn't change a thing.
That's wonderful to hear. Definitely worth hearing the story. So, 27, number one in-house legal counsel, and then they ask you to do HR, all these things. How do you deal with, was there any self-doubt at all?
A ton.
A ton, okay. How do you deal with it? What do you tell yourself when you say, you know what, maybe I'm not quite cut out to do this and I've been entrusted with way too much?
Yeah, so, I'm sure folks here or some in the group, know what imposter syndrome is. And, I had never heard of it until I was a living, breathing embodiment of an imposter and I was reading about it. But it was really, it was just this commitment to doing the work and not shying away from whatever it took to be the most prepared, to be, it was never going to be, the smartest or the most connected or the most social or the most charming or any of that stuff. I knew that nobody would outwork me. I knew that nobody would want it more than me. But I suffered from that early. I still do in a lot of ways. I've gotten better at it maybe in the last year, more so. But I have this job that has a fancy logo and a big title. But when I look in the mirror, I see the 23-year-old intern who just got hired at $7 an hour, and it's been a unique transition for me to look in the mirror and not see that anymore, because I don't ever take for granted or feel entitled to the role that I serve for so many people in the organization. I try to justify my existence every day, and not in a way that's insecure, but in a validation for the people that have believed in me, that have entrusted me, and I want to prove them right over and over again. But yeah, at 27, I'm 36 now. Even that's too young for I shouldn't be doing some of the things that I'm doing. But it's just a number, and you realize as you progress through, your career, you realize the people with these big jobs or big titles, like, they're just people. Like, they're just people. They have all the same insecurities that you have. They have all the same personality flaws, and they don't floss their teeth, and they didn't prepare, and they were late for the meeting, and they're just humans. And I think I idolized a lot of the folks in these roles in a way that it wasn't their fault, but I looked up to them and I wanted it so bad, and they were always in the news, and they looked so cool and all this stuff, and like they're just men and women. They're just dudes. Like, they're just people. And when you get to the, I have not arrived. I don't pretend to have arrived in any way, but when you get to the role, you realize that your peers are just people too. And I always laugh. I'm not the most smiley, outgoing person in the office, probably because I have so much going on in my brain all the time. But folks often tell me if they didn't know me very well, they thought I was, not friendly or mean or jerk or all these other vulgar things. And when they get to know me, they're like, I can't believe I ever thought you were anything other than just a human. I'm like, yeah, I'm a human first. I'm just a human with a lot of stress, and I have a deadline, and but everybody in these roles they're just human beings. They're nothing more. So there's no reason that you can't do that job if you put in the work. You get a little luck, you get support from friends and family, all that stuff. So but yeah, there are times that I still struggle with this idea that I'm actually the person that the nameplate says I am. That's an ongoing challenge for me.
Thank you for that humility and for demystifying greatness for us. It is indeed a very, very comforting thought to know that. Um, One of the themes that emerges from your comments is the importance of mentorship. I heard you mention Tom Garfinkel a couple of times. Can you talk to us a little bit about what mentorship has meant for you and what it should mean for someone?
Yeah, so I think it means something different for everyone. And I've been lucky, throughout different phases of my career to have different mentors, both sort of on a formal and informal basis. And my first, real professional mentor was my boss at Elon. His name was Peter Tolchinsky. So Elon is a very student-run university where all the programs on campus are run by the students. So the campus recreation program, go down the list, are all their student leaders. And I worked for campus recreation. I got a job there as an official for the intramural program my sophomore year, and I was 19. And the program was run by a senior every year. A senior is the one who's in charge of all these programs across campus. And for whatever reason, Peter elevated me to sort of be in charge of the program as a sophomore, and he believed in me in a way that I didn't see in myself. And he was very diligent, detail-oriented, thoughtful, read a lot about leadership and goal setting and like sort of this idea of tracking improvement and how do you measure your results. And that was my first exposure to that. So he was an incredible professional mentor through Elon. And then when I got to the Dolphins, it was Tom who I've mentioned a number of times. He still is a great mentor of mine. And Dan Casperson was the other gentleman. So he was a longtime executive at Target and Toys R Us. And he was a friend of Tom's, and he brought in Dan to be an HR consultant right around when he started. And Dan went around and interviewed everyone in the organization. At the time, it was, in the business side, it was some 200 people or something. He went around and he met with everyone. Half an hour over the course of a month, he met with everybody in the organization, and he took notes. And he's an expert judge of talent and people. And his charge from Tom was to evaluate the people at the organization, make recommendations on structure and changes, to really try to perform at a level that Target and Toys R Us has from an organizational standard of excellence. And I think I was one of the last people to meet with Dan at the time. And I wouldn't believe this if he didn't keep the notes, but he showed me the notes many years later. The only note he had on my page was my name at the top, and he just wrote HR in big letters and he circled it. So that was when I was working in legal at the time. So that was part of the pivot to go work into HR with Dan. So I was attached to Dan's hip for a full year. And he was a consultant. He was never really an employee. He was sort of he was in retirement for the third time, whatever it was. But I spent every day with Dan. I picked his brain. I asked him a million questions a day. I always joked that, I would eat lunch and Dan would call me and say, "Have you had lunch yet?" And I'd say, "No, I haven't had lunch." So I gained 15 pounds working for him because I just wanted to soak up this knowledge and learn. So he was an incredible mentor in that specific, side of my career, and he still is. He's filled with wisdom. He's seen and done everything in the world, and he came from retail, where retail has tens of thousands of employees. So if you want to talk about, expertise relative to scaling performance management or hiring, like he's like arguably the world's best at it. So he was really a great mentor for me.
So obviously in your career, you've seen a lot of good managers. You talked about Dan, you talked about Tom. Some others may have had a few opportunities for growth, presumably. What are the lessons that you've taken away from people who managed you, so to speak?
Sure. So I've had some challenging bosses in my career. And, this is a little cliche, but, you can often learn, how to do things from a good boss, and you can learn how you don't want to do things from a boss who's maybe not as good. And I think that's just as valuable as you learn when I get a chance to lead people or be around, large organizations at a leadership level, like, I don't want to do it this way because I experienced this and I hated it and it wasn't effective. And I had a lot of that in my my career trajectory. Is I'm so incredibly lucky now to have two bosses who are incredible human beings and incredible leaders, and Tom and Chris Greer, our GM. But that wasn't the case for the majority of my career. But it's learning how to overcome challenges, how you don't want to do things, and how to really deal with this idea of, like I shared earlier, I grew up wanting to do, in large part, the job that I was doing and am doing, and I hated it. So there was this realization of, like, it's maybe your dreams, like, there's a reality associated with it that is normal, and you have to overcome it, and you have to get through the adversity and learn how to deal with challenging situations and unfair, being overlooked, for titles or promotions or money. And I had a boss for a while who refused to give me a vice president title, and I would have, so I used to, when I would get frustrated, I would say I'm either severely undertitled or severely overpaid, and it was just this idea of, he wanted my path to be what his was, which was, he worked for a boss that wouldn't reward people who earned it, and you had to pay your dues, and you had to work this artificial amount of time before you can get this artificial title and reach this artificial salary threshold or whatever it is. And I swore through that time period that if I had the opportunity to be in a leadership role, that I would never do some of those things. And I hopefully I don't do them, but you learn as much from the bad experiences and the bad bosses as you do from the good ones. That's for sure.
So, are there particular attributes of your leaders and bosses that kind of stick out as vital? And has that kind of informed your approach? Individual attributes that you can think of. Anything that stands out in your mind?
Sure, and I have the unique privilege in our organization of interviewing the finalists for every role at every level in the organization. And with that, you learn and serve as, I get the privilege to serve as, like, this barometer of, does this candidate have the traits to be successful? And it's really the traits of our leaders, because we want to build this environment where we're a high-performing culture that delivers great results and does it in a way that we can be proud of, with high integrity and character and all those things. So, what I look for, or what I've experienced from good bosses, is what I look for in the candidates that we hire, which is this, this mindset of continuous learning and always trying to improve and get better. And that's a trait that I try to identify in candidates at all levels, and it's hard in certain instances to try to figure that out in a 15-minute Teams interview, but it's about trying to read whether somebody doesn't act like they have all the answers, and you don't want anyone who thinks they've arrived. I joke that we're not a retirement job for folks. Like, we're this ongoing, living, breathing organization that is always evolving, always growing. And I give this example, and I'll bring up Tom again. He has this custom piece of art in his office, and it's artifacts from his career, ticket stubs and pamphlets and all these pictures, and it spells out always be learning. And it's this ethos we try to implement throughout the organization. And I tell the junior salesperson or whoever it is if he thinks he should still be learning, like, who are we to think we've got it all figured out? And I think that's the best folks I've been around are always learning. They're not trying to be right, and they want you to challenge them. I think some of the growth that I experienced early on was that I wasn't scared to tell the truth or challenge to the people in quote-unquote power. And as you get higher in the org chart, there's fewer people who tell you the truth because they like job security and they want to be liked. And I had, for whatever reason, an irrational confidence of, I will tell the truth and I'll live and die by the truth. And if that's not something that is rewarded in this organization, then I don't want to be here. And, I really enjoy working with leaders that don't want yes men and women around them. You want to be challenged. Now, your challenge better be well thought out. It better not be on a whim or, totally off the wall. But you want folks who are, what we say is disciplined but not dogmatic. You want a disciplined approach to decision making and problem solving, and you want to be disciplined within these guidelines that exist towards a certain goal. But you can't be dogmatic because context matters, situations matter. You deal with human beings, so you can't put a human being in a box, let alone two human beings in the same box. Everybody's different. So it's about this, applying judgment, taking into account your own experiences, the situation, the people you're dealing with, and ultimately, get to what you think is the best decision. But, that's what I love about the leaders that I get to work with, and we try to hire more and more people like that because those are the people in our environment who end up being the most successful.
That's wonderful. You've talked a lot about evolution and growth. You are an extremely busy man. How much time do you bucket or budget for reflection? Because things come at you so quickly, even if you did have the mindset to learn, do you actually have the time to learn?
Fewer time than ever, but I do. I try to take, intentional time about reflecting, if that's, in the sauna at the end of the day, or if that's in the shower at the end of the night, whatever it is try to clear my brain and turn off and reflect on, what's happened during the day or what decisions I've made or what did I miss or, but it's hard and the allocation of time is difficult as I've grown in my career, because I used to be very successful because I would spend a lot of time on a particular topic, so I would deliver a really great work product. Well, now I have to either deliver that same work product with a fraction of the time or lead the development and delivery of that growth of that work product without actually doing any of the work. So, the allocation of the time is totally different. You get pulled in so many different directions. And, I'm a big believer in, spending time with people and investing time and understanding who they are and their motivations. And I think that's been part of my success in HR and my success in hiring is I'm a really good judgment of people and their talents and where their weaknesses are and how do I help them. But I've done that for the majority of my career with time spent. So now I have to give the same opinion, judgment, whatever it may be, with far less time allocated to that particular task. And one thing Coach McDaniel talks about also, and it was his, some of his realizations as he became a first-time head coach, it's not only time, but it's your energy. So where do you deploy your energy? So you can have, a shorter amount of, a shorter meeting with a group of people or department, but, one thing he does really, really well is he's really present when he's with somebody. He invests, incredible energy into engagement and trying to, impart his expertise, his guidance, his wisdom, his leadership, whatever it might be at the time. But that takes a lot out of you. He gets in at 3:30, 4 in the morning, and we joke, and at the end of the day, sometimes you get tired Mike because he's poured so much energy into all the people in the building to sort of help them succeed, to help us succeed, and it's something that I've tried to model with him. Is it's not just time, but it's really the deliberate energy that you pour into it.
Absolutely. So I want to open it up now to the audience to ask a few questions of Brandon. If you raise your hand, we'll pass the mic around. Blanca here has the mic. So first question, Horace, go ahead.
Hello, well, thank you very much. My name is Horace Porras, Sources for Affinity. And I have a question regarding leadership skills, definitely something that is not only applicable to executive teams or management. It's really across all the organization, and especially in one like yours that has so much visibility. What are the things that you actually do to make sure that absolutely everybody understands the importance of being a leader and actually portraying the image of a good leader, not just within the company, the organization itself, but outside? It's like we're 24 hours a day representing the company.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's an ongoing challenge, and particularly for an organization like ours that's very, very public, and there's a ton of interest in it all the time. I can't tell you how many times that I'll have a conversation with an agent, and within minutes of hanging up with the call or hanging up with them, Ann Nolan, who's here, runs our PR department, will come down to my office and say she just got a call from a reporter with all the information that I just shared with the agent. So there's a ton of attention and interest in what we do, and with that comes a certain responsibility. I think, relative to leadership and what we're looking for, what we want, and I think it's important to be really consistent. And I think this is it happens often in the coaching community when teaching players or trying to impart a new culture. Is you want to be consistent with the messaging. So you want to as I said that Tom does at every all staff meeting, is he shows the slide about this is how we win on and off the field. The way Mike does it is he'll bring up often this idea of presence. I mentioned earlier he has elite presence when he's interacting with people. So once a week, whatever it is in team meetings in season, he'll remind the players, be present, be present, be present. It's he'll often remind folks in the organization what our rules are, what we stand for, one way to do that is to be consistent and frequent on communicating values, communicating what we stand for, and over time it gets embedded in people whether they like it or not. And if you're around it enough and you hear it enough, you can sort of close your eyes and recite exactly what the leader's going to say. And predictability as it relates to culture and what your leader stands for is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You always know that in hard times or in hard decisions, our leaders are going to make the right decision for the right reasons. That gives you this sense of comfort that you're in an environment that you want to be in, that we live our values. And that's a phrase we use often, specifically in our business side performance management processes. We score employees on living the values. So we have these long list of values and descriptions, and ultimately bonuses are tied to how you live the values every day. So it's not just a statement, a PowerPoint once a year. It's repetitive, it's frequent, it's consistent, and you have to live it.
Another question.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. My question is twofold. First, how has the University of Miami and its network of connections helped you in your career? And secondly, how would you advise young professionals to better utilize their network and set them on a path to success?
Sure. So I had a number of opportunities in law school to work at various law firms that ultimately I never had to, because I got lucky enough to meet the general manager of the Dolphins, and I never had to do what I call is be a real lawyer. But they're incredible connections and alumni in the community, and we hire Law students every year for externships at the Dolphins on the corporate side, and you're in Miami, and we have some really successful major sports teams, and that connection. I wouldn't work for the Dolphins if I didn't go to Law because of proximity and geography. So I think that that matters a great deal. What was the second part of your question? Oh, yeah, that's right. So, I went to, in undergrad and in law school, I went to an incredible amount of networking events, sort of similar to this, and, happy hours and get-togethers and all these things. And, what I tell students all the time is, 99% of those are not going to have any return on investment. But all you need is one to work. And if you play the odds, take more shots. Take as many shots as you can, because you don't need to, if you go to 25 of them in a school year, you don't need 25 of them to be successful. You need one to be successful. So I would go to all the events. I'm not particularly this outgoing social person, so that was a challenge for me, to try to carry a conversation or, introduce myself, or try to not to really aggressively be like, please give me a job. But, I would try, and I would put myself in uncomfortable situations to meet people. And, in some ways, that's why I went to that Dolphins event, because there was an opportunity to maybe meet, the general manager. And if I didn't go to that, who knows how my career would have, progressed. And all the rest of them that I went to in that year weren't successful. But that one was, and 13 years later, I get to share that story with everyone here. So it's take as many shots as you can, because you never know which one's going to work. If you knew which one was going to work, you'd just do that one. But that's not the case. So it's put yourself out there, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, put yourself out of your comfort zone, and you never know, how that'll benefit you.
Wonderful advice. We have time for a couple more questions. Okay. If you can, please introduce yourself and tell us which program you're in.
My name is Kevin Train. I'm a student here at the University of Miami. My question to you is, bringing in exceptional players like Tyreek Hill, Jalen, Ramsey, how does motivation come into play, and do you feel pressure at all? And how do you stay calm in a process like that?
Yeah, so it's hard because when you deal with players of that magnitude, it's hard to pretend like they're not players of that magnitude. But in the moment, I have a job to do and an obligation to the people I work with and for, to do my job to the best of my ability. And it's often high pressure. I mentioned earlier the competitive nature of our business, specific to Tyreek. We were again going against the Jets to get that deal done. And it happened over a 3-day period, and we reached a trade agreement with the Chiefs the same day that the Jets did, and they gave permission to Tyreek to negotiate a new contract with us and the Jets. And whichever contract he chose was the team he was going to go to. So I worked with Chris Greer to negotiate, the trade terms, and then shifted to the contract itself. And, I couldn't screw up my part of the deal, otherwise we were going to lose the player. So it was really this, maybe 36-hour all-night period where we were trying to get it done, and, I don't think the world knew about it yet, but we knew that we were competing against ultimately our biggest rival for the best wide receiver in football. And, there was moments where I realized the magnitude of what I was doing, but I couldn't stay there because I had a job, I had a responsibility, and it was, I lived for that response. I always dreamed of being in that position to ultimately, deliver for my hometown team, the best player, all these things. But that time period was a lot of stress. It was a lot of fun. I'll never forget, we were there all night for one of the nights, and Ann, who I mentioned, and Coach McDaniel were in my office. They wouldn't leave. And it was, whatever it was, 2 a.m, and I'm like, guys, you can go home. Like, I don't know if this is going to get done tonight. And they were both like, we want to be here for the moment that we know we got them. We want to remember this. That's how sort of the magnitude of it was that significant. So whatever it was, 2 in the morning, the agent, Drew Rosenhaus, called and said we need to sleep on it. And so then we all our shoulders dropped, and we all, went home, and ultimately the next day we were able to close it. And that's a whole nother hour presentation on how that happened. But, you have to, I don't pretend that the job that I get to do doesn't have really significant and really public implications, that there's a lot of zeros and there's a lot riding on it. I don't pretend that is not part of it, but I can't stay there because then it distracts me from executing the job at the highest level possible for me.
We have time for one more question. Robert?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Locke. I'm a full-time MBA student here. Among other points you made, I really appreciated the always be learning point. So I was wondering, with a little bit of the time we have left, if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, some of the ways you are always learning, whether it's at work, outside of work. I mean, maybe for something that I can relate to, like a book that was particularly memorable, podcasts, conversation, kind of weekly check-ins with employees, just kind of some more of the different way, excuse me, in which you go about that learning process.
Sure. So I think there's a great deal of importance in academic learning, and that's the schooling and the degrees and the letters after your name, and all that is an important foundation. But I think there's a whole different level of learning when you're in real life and you're not dealing with books, you're dealing with humans, and all business deals with humans in one way or another. I'll listen to podcasts, and I'll read certain websites that I think are really insightful for me. But the way I learn the best is in the trenches. It's living in the arena, so to speak, and it's about taking a problem, failing, learning from it, asking a lot of questions. I think one of the best ways to learn is just to ask. And you'd be surprised how many people in executive roles love when people ask. People often like talking about themselves, and if you give them the chance to do that, they feel good about themselves, and you can actually take away a lot of knowledge, whether they're from their experiences, things, you're not only hearing from what they have to tell you, is you're hearing from all the people that have told them things. And, I think you guys have heard a couple examples of what Tom Garfinkel has taught me, and you've never met Tom. And I think if you can pull information from people, you don't only get it from them, you get it from their network of people that they've learned from. And I'm not a big formal check-in, formal mentorship, here's my every other Tuesday meeting and I'm going to ask you 6 questions. And I'm more of the human component and natural and organic, and you can be intentional about wanting to learn, but I think if you structure it, oftentimes, it's disingenuous or it's forced, and it's not as impactful. So, my way of learning is really just being around people. Tell me what you were thinking about there. Why did you do it this way? And not pretending I have all the answers. And even if you have a big title or whatever, you'd be shocked how much people want to tell you and teach you. And if you just ask them, they're more than willing to do it.
Brandon, I want to thank you. It's very clear that you are a leader that values people and places a great emphasis on them. It's very clear that you approach your leadership with great humility. Those are all incredible lessons for all of us here, not just our students. With a leader like you, I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins are the only team to not just have one undefeated season, but maybe one more. So thank you, Brandon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.